welcome to Kate Angier's Book Reviews, the place where we shine a light on indie books and their authors. Today I'm going to be discussing Love Like Gilded Bones. And it is going to be a slightly shorter review than normal. Go ahead and check out the interview because in the interview, it's a slightly longer interview than normal, and I tend to sort of go into a little bit more of my thoughts in more detail there. So there is no real need to repeat myself here. So go ahead and check that out. Or if you are listening on the podcast, then just that will happen at the end of this review. So you don't have to do anything, just continue listening. But for those who are watching on YouTube, just head to my page and you'll be able to find the interview there. So Love Like Gilded Bones. This is by Ciaran Farengray, and this book can be found on Amazon. And this is the current cover. This is the old cover, but the new cover is there. So that's what you're looking out for. So yeah, let's crack into it. So Love Like Gilded Bones, we follow two characters. We have Yvereth, which is this very mysterious, very elegant, very poised and pretty stoic male main character, MMC. And then we also have River, who is our FMC, female main character, and she has a very dark past, and she is on the run from said past, and she has a lot of demons inside her, and through her connection with Yvereth, she's able to come to terms with those, come to accept herself, love herself even, and she finds a real kinship with him and he and her. They both come from very dark backgrounds, both tainted in death in one way or other, some more extreme than others, but generally they do bond over this sort of recognize darkness within each other, and also I think the need to kind of grow from that and essentially just become their best selves. So it's very wholesome dark romance, and to be honest with Ciaran's work, there usually is an element of that. You know, they always state that their books always have a happy ending. What those happy endings look like, however, they're not always so conventional, but you know, you're never left feeling depressed or anything like that, you know. So yeah, there's not like a huge sort of like A to B to C plot, and it's more of a character study and this relationship and how it develops. So yeah, if that kind of sounds like your sort of thing, then yeah, definitely recommend this book. So I've briefly mentioned the characters. I don't want to go too much into that because, as I said, the book really is about these two characters. What I will say is that Yvereth is a skeleton. He's been cursed. Why? I will not say. This is a non-spoiler review, although I will say that the interview does go into spoilers. So if you want to read the book before finding anything out, then I suggest you go ahead and do that and then come back and join us in the interview. But yeah, it's one of those ones where we see real character arc, and Yvereth is someone who starts out with definitely more insidious agendas. His interest in River is definitely pretty selfish and abusive. And this is sort of the motivations behind a lot of his more questionable actions. But then as they spend more and more time together, you know, we see that his interest in her becomes something much more genuine, and something that really taps into what humanity he has remaining, and we see that flourish, and that is just so beautiful to read. And the way that he brings her out as well, out of her shell. She is this very just, she is in survival mode, and she has been for the longest time, you know. So when she meets him, she's in a very vulnerable position. She's desperate, and the offer that he gives her, in terms of this whole new life, this new world, because it's not set in our world, it's set in a different universe that is where Siren's work is all kind of based, in the Toll of Flesh series. And you know, there are demons, there are monsters, I mean, there are, you know, evil spirits and all kinds of things. Necromancy plays a really big part in Siren's work, and this is another book that delves into that. And so yeah, so he kind of sees this very vulnerable person, and although his agenda with her starts off one way, I think because he sees some of himself in her, it actually ends up going a completely different direction. And as a result, because of his attention and because of his understanding of who she really is at her core, she's able to accept herself and some of the things that she feels shame of. And it goes to some very real places. Please read the trigger warnings. Not just for the shocking taboo stuff, but there is a lot of real hard things in there, to do with suicide and self-harm and things. And you know, it's really beautifully handled. It's very respectful. So when I say heed the trigger warnings, I don't mean because it could offend someone, because I don't think it would. Personally, me, I don't think it would, but just it might bring up some emotional responses that, you know, if you're not in the right frame of mind to handle, then you know, I would be irresponsible to not mention that. But yeah, these two characters, the way that they weave with each other and interact and grow and flourish and blossom, it's genuinely magical. It really is. It's just lovely. So my last segment talked about themes a little bit, so I'm gonna naturally segue to themes. So apart from the ones that I've mentioned, food is a big theme. We do talk about that in the interview, and there is this, it almost becomes a mealtime ritual that Yivareth and River partake in. So Yivareth, being a skeleton, he can't taste. He can't eat. He doesn't have a need to eat, and he couldn't really anyway, because he has no way of digesting. He has no tongue when he eats. So he asks River to describe the food, and Siren mentions this. They won't mind me saying this, but Siren has a very complicated relationship with food, being that they can't eat a lot of things due to intolerances and things like that. So you know, Siren's relationship with food is very complicated, and you know, the way that they write about these different meals and these different delicacies, it's like, oh, it's just incredible. And you know, there's very much similarities to like the types of foods, and like the way that they're presented, and the kind of level of decadency with these meals is very sort of on a par with the kind of food that Hannibal serves up in the Hannibal TV show, if anyone has seen that. If you haven't and you're not put off by body horror and extreme gore, recommend. It's great. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about this book. But yeah, it's very descriptive, and honestly, like, give us a recipe book, please, Siren. Let's have, Girl's Guide to Yivareth Cooking, please, because this girl, she hungry. Yeah, these meals are amazing, but more to it, there's a hunger with these characters. They are very much consumed by each other. And I think as well that the way that obsession and love and desire can be all consuming, it really just, and it becomes a hunger. These words aren't associated with these types of feelings for no reason. They completely envelop you, and it's something that needs to be sated. And the way that these characters move through this story and move through these experiences together is very much represented in the way that River approaches these meal times. Initially, she's very kind of like, she has a lot of questions. She's very confused. She's not entirely sure what's going on. She is a little bit cagey by it all. But then after a little while, she accepts it for what it is, and she understands Yivareth more, and she comes to enjoy it. She comes to look forward to it and spending this time together, and having these very intimate interactions, because food is a very intimate thing. When you share food and you cook for someone, it's an intimate thing. And Yivareth cooks everything for her. He serves her. He has manservants, but he doesn't let them serve her. He insists on serving her because he wants to be as much of this enjoyment as he possibly can. And when she describes these meals, he listens so intently, and it's very much a metaphor for their relationship and just how they interact and connect. It's beautiful. It is. It's really beautiful. And the fact that it comes from such a personal place with the author just makes it, well, chef's kiss. The setting. The setting is, gorgeous. It is a Gothic dream. This I've read all of Siren's work, and this is by far the most Gothic of their portfolio. And it's set in this huge mansion. There are roses everywhere. There's an entire rose garden, and they go out at night and they look at the stars and the moonlight, and it's and there's books and there's candles and there's a dungeon, and then he has these like lurching henchmen and like manservants and things, very sort of Gothic, kind of Dracula, kind of Italian cinema horror from the 60s or whatever, and 70s and things, like it's very much evokes that very oldie timey. And the fact that Yivareth as well, because he's centuries old, and so he speaks in a very old-fashioned way, which is even more noticeable against River's more contemporary tongue. And even though he doesn't speak often, I mean, that in itself is very Gothic, that he's very stoic and is a man of few words. But then when he does speak, it's all very deliberate, and he says what he means and he means what he says, and there's like old journals around, and secret passageways, and it's just, if any of that, it's just brilliant. It's just, yes, very Gothic, very cool. And I just wish that I could get a tour around this mansion, because it's so good. The spice. Any dark romance reader knows that taboos like to be pushed, that things that happen in these books are not usually what we condone in actual life. They are a safe space to explore fantasies and enjoy some escapism. And that is absolutely the case with Love Like Gilded Bones. Siren loves to push buttons and go to some very unusual places. and delve into things that really, like, I don't really feel like many people have considered as a kink or as a sexual thing generally. But they have this really incredible ability to turn you on, wink, turn you on to certain things, and take you to places where you just never expect to be. And you're like, aha, okay. And then you're like, that's hot. I mean, maybe it's just me and maybe I'm just deranged. I don't know. But, you know, Siren's fans, me amongst them, do very much enjoy these scenes. And I think because they are kind of outlandish. And, you know, Siren has clearly such a great time writing these. And, you know, you think about this book and, you know, spoiler alert, they do hook up. But it's like, he's a skeleton. How does that work? I'm not going to tell you. But yeah, questions raised for sure. Like, because I kind of knew where it's heading. It's kind of obvious where it's heading, especially because it's a dark romance and there's only 2 characters. You know, do the math. But the whole way through, you're like, how does he? No. And it's very that until you get there and you're like, oh, okay. Okay. And, you know, and even the acts that they engage in and the things that he does to her, they, again, trigger warnings, people, read them. But, you know, there, you know, there is blood play. There's, you know, you know, there are just some words I just can't seem to say. Sadomasochism, BDSM, the extreme. Yeah, it's there's not a lot with a lot of other, we talk about this in the interview, but with Siren's other work, there's, you know, a lot of like smut and spice and things, like from kind of the get-go, whereas this one is far more of a slow burn. I mean, I say slow burn, it's less than 200 pages long, the whole book, but it takes like a good, it's really only like in the last third do we get this sex scene, and it's one sex scene. But yeah, Siren doesn't hold back. But it's just one sex scene. So that's quite unusual for Siren and their work. So it was this real slow burn. I mean, the whole book is pretty intimate. I mean, as I've said, food is very much a theme. It really plays into that intimacy, that closeness. And so there is this real build of sexual tension. He writes her love letters, things like that. You know, he's very old fashioned in that way, being that he's like 200 years old. But there's no actual real sex. There's lots of flirting. There's lots of kind of innuendo, suggestive like language and things like that. But there's no actual real sex until quite a chunk in. And so it's really good actually, because you have this build up for the entirety of the book prior to this moment, and then suddenly boom, it's just like, okay, you know, it's a climax. And yeah, so it's quality, not quantity, I think, is the takeaway here. And that is kind of most of what else I have to say. I mean, anything else, there are things that can be gone into in a lot more detail. They are in the interview. As I said, I don't really see the point in repeating. Just go check out the interview. It's a really fun interview. Siren is just, lovely. Really, really have got to know them over recent months, and like, they are just so lovely. So I really do implore you to go check out the interview. Ideally read the book first, because we do go into a lot of spoilers, more than this review. But, you know, if you don't mind, go check it out, because it's a really great interview, and we do discuss a lot of things in great detail. So anything that you feel like maybe is missing here, it's on purpose. Go check the interview out. And yeah, and you can buy, as I said at the beginning, you can buy Love Like Gilded Bones on Amazon. It's got a slightly different cover. This is the older one, but a new one is released just a month or so ago, and it's gorgeous. So yeah, it's there for you to look out for, or you can download it on Kindle. So yeah, however, and it's also on Audible as well. So however you like to read, there are no excuses. Go check it out. It's a really great book. Just heed the trigger warnings. But if any of this sounds like it's up your alley, yeah, really great, really well written, really great characters, really interesting characters, a gorgeous setting, really interesting and intricate themes that play on a lot of different things that are very, very relatable, even though these characters and the setting are pretty unrelatable. I don't know, maybe you do live in you know, a gothic mansion with, you know, lurching manservants and a stoic yet charismatic skeletal host. Who am I to assume? But chances are you're not, and you don't. So you know, it's good that they have these themes and these things that are very relatable to a lot of people, because it makes the whole book and these characters very accessible. So yeah, enjoy. Love Like Gilded Bones by Ciaran Farringray. Eat your heart out.